Thank you everyone for joining our session today. The session title is Changing Your Costing Methods in D365 Finance and Operations, What to Expect and Is It Worth It? We are thrilled to be joined by David Oceanero today. And my name is Jenna, I'll be your moderator. I have a few quick reminders before we go ahead and kick off the presentation. First, please don't forget to fill out your session survey. We have 3 quick questions found on the conference agenda. If you need any CPE credits, we will be sending out a survey for you after the event to fill out. And so you'll complete that survey and that's how you'll receive your CPE credits. And we will be collecting questions in the chat panel and we'll save some time at the end of the presentation to go over those. So type those in for David and we'll get to them at the end. And then lastly, this is one of our last summit presentations of the day, but the expo hall will remain open through the end of the afternoon. So please check out the expo hall when you can. So without further ado, David, I'm going to turn it over to you to take it away.
Awesome. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Happy Friday. Thank you for attending my session here about changing cost methods. It's going to be a 2-pronged session today. Both sessions are recorded. So we're going to start with the video. It's going to go through a PowerPoint. It's going to give you a little bit of background, some do's and don'ts. And then I have a second video that I pre-recorded that's actually going to demo the functionality. Figured I'd record it. Hopefully it'll save us if any technical issues come up. So I'm going to go get started here with my video and hope you enjoy. Thanks.
All right, I think we can get started here. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to my presentation about changing your costing method in D365 Finance and Operations, what to expect, and is it worth it? My name is David Oceanero, and I'm a functional consultant and have been with my company, Logan Consulting, for 6.5 years and have been working with Dynamics for a grand total of 10. Currently, my focus is on D365, but I've worked with the product since 2009. My specialties are on the supply chain of the house with a focus on MRP, production, and costing. As mentioned previously, I've been with Logan Consulting for 6.5 years. We have over 28 years of experience implementing and supporting ERP implementations, upgrades, and support. Logan offers a wide spectrum of technology and business professionals, deploying roughly 80 consultants a year worldwide. We specialize in manufacturing, distribution, and service industries. We are a gold partner since 2003. We have been members and gold contributors since 2004, and I've personally posted blogs and recorded a seminar through the user group. Our core services are AX and D365 assessments, implementations, optimizations, and support. We also provide AX and D365 business process design and have strong program and project management. So now that we went through a little housekeeping, let's get to the presentation. So why? Why did I pick this topic to present to you today? I chose this presentation because I have received numerous requests throughout the years regarding this topic. Many of the requests start with a basic inquiry about why costs on items, orders, and transactions are not coming through as expected. From there, typically the next step in the process is to dig into the costing setup within a legal entity, and then finally come up with some proposed solutions. So normally after some back and forth with the client on potential changes, the conversation continues, and on occasion it turns into a, well, why do we want to do cost this way? This question from the client will then lead to further conversations about what other costing versions are available within D365 and whether they are eligible for potential cost change. Sometimes the conversation ends there, right? While other times the conversation will make its way maybe to a managerial level. If I'm speaking with a manager or the managerial level, it can even go up to the executive level when talking about the changes of costing. So that's a little bit on the why I selected this topic. So let's go through the agenda for this afternoon. We will be going over some costing decisions. We will take a deep dive into a standard cost conversion and answer the question, how is the conversion handled from a system perspective? And what configuration do I need before I actually do the conversion? So I've got that on tap. I'm going to go through that, going to do a few screenshots and a couple slides. Then at the end of the conversation, I'm going to do a demo that's going to show functionality in D365. And then we're also going to be covering a few scenarios that are not a conversion from standard cost. And then we'll also review a few other costing tips that may help you in your company and environment. So what drives the costing decision? As I'm sure we have all been through this process, an inventory costing decision must be made during the design phase of an implementation. Many times that decision is made based on a company's environment. Does the company make the costing decision have the discipline to track costs today? Does the company making the costing decision have the resources available to track system costs at a granular level? Other questions to ask are centered around the goals and benefits of the implementation. Is the company that is standing up Dynamics coming from an antiquated system where efficiencies will be gained elsewhere in the system before looking at costs? Right, so is that company prioritizing improved sales delivery, managing inventory, and reducing the needed days for month-end close? These questions and decisions related to ERP may identify why a particular inventory costing method was selected. There are also scenarios where a company feels their costing is in a good but not great place. Many times the costing method selected matches where the company currently stands with costing, which is essentially a good place. So since the costing solution is in a good place, that might go to the back burner. ERP will naturally improve in other areas of the system, such as our on-time delivery, our delivery to promise, which will then lead to repeat business from customers, which will then increase revenues and decrease costs. So because of this kind of optimistic snowball effect, we will see a cumulative improvement in EBITDA margin, which helps analyze the company's profitability. So these are some of the activities where the ERP can take you from good to great in other areas of the business in the system, while still maintaining a good handle of costs. So you gotta think about that as you determine how we made that costing decision. So now that we covered why a company may select a specific costing method, let's switch gears and talk about costing in D365 and how it works. This may be repetitive for some of you on the call, but it may be a nice refresher for others. From a system perspective, D365's primary function for costing is to develop an estimated cost per unit for every substantial stocked and/or stockable item. So why do we need to cost at the item level? Well, we are doing it because we must value our inventory. You cannot value inventory from the GL without having an item cost. So with this item cost as our basis, we can then sprinkle in different flavors of costing to develop a better costing picture. For example, there can be specific services or charges that are not tangible items, such as transportation charges, duties, brokerage fees, etc. Additionally, users can also expense items on receipt that may not be traditionally tracked, and charges can occur on the outbound shipment of inventory to customers. So as you can see, costs can be creatively captured in many areas of the system. Now on this slide, I did want to highlight a new feature that's coming out in the newer releases in D365. So if any of you are familiar with the inventory value report and, depending on the configuration of the inventory value report, how long it takes to run, there is actually a form in D365 that allows you to view and kind of save how the inventory value report was run, which is going to reduce the amount of runtime it takes. So here I just took a quick snippet, right? You see your traditional, your financial quantity, financial amount, quantity posted, all those columns, they're here in the system instead of a report. I think it's a great feature. I know this isn't about the inventory value report, but you know what? I figured I'd sprinkle in some new functionality as well. So that was exciting to me. Hopefully it's the same for you. So the previous slide indicated why we needed costs on an item in D365, and this slide also provided an extremely brief description of how they can be applied. But what do we do with the costs once we have them? From the slide, it's pretty straightforward with the business decisions that can be made once costs have been received from Dynamics. Right, there can be top-down directives for cost reductions. The cost data allows sales departments to optimize or revisit pricing. And then the information also allows businesses to analyze any cost alternatives that may be available to them. Perhaps they can develop a new way to source raw material. They will also have accurate data at their fingertips to determine a make versus buy approach for certain items. And the business may be better equipped to see if it makes sense to continue or discontinue a product. So now that we have dug into D365 costing a bit, let's discuss the different ways that the inventory costing method can be changed in D365. So let me first start with a disclaimer that each of these methods has significant impacts to all current operations within D365. Deciding to change a costing method is not something that can be executed without buy-in from the entire company and stakeholders. The process to change the costing method is extremely tedious, and it also requires a level of orchestration amongst different departments for success. So, with that being said, as I go through and show you, the system steps on how to change the costing method, it might appear simple, but that system process doesn't encompass all the, blood, sweat, and tears that went into coming, the offline work that's required when making this type of change, both just functionally from gathering all that data all the way up to the executive level who are now having to declare a new costing method. So I did not want to minimize that. Just because we can do something in the system does not mean, there isn't a challenge to get us to that point, to get us over that goal line. So the three paths that I will discuss today are listed on this slide, and we will briefly go into each. And then again, here's my second disclaimer for this slide. Each transition listed here has its own set of unique circumstances and complexities. So here on the slide, you can see we're going to go over, FIFO, LIFO, average costing to standard costing, FIFO, LIFO to another FIFO, LIFO, average costing. That third bullet point we'll get to later, but we cannot go from standard costing to FIFO, LIFO, or average costing. So there's a different method to do it, but we'll get to it later. It's pretty much another implementation of Dynamics in terms of creating a new item, taking inventory out, reloading inventory. That whole piece is really the only way we could do that standard costing to FIFO, LIFO, or average, and sometimes it's just not worth the process to do that. Okay, so let's take a deep dive into a conversion to standard costing. The shift to a standard costing version involves many steps, but there is a nice feature in D365 that will assist you along the way. It is located under Product Information Management, Cost Conversions, Standard Cost Conversions, and it's highlighted there on the screen. The high-level steps of the process are identified in this slide. Prior to the system being ready for conversion, we will need to communicate with all parties for a planned cutover. Once it's been communicated and a date has been established, preferably a weekend, we could then begin the process. So the first step in the process will be to close inventory. The inventory close step in the process can be complicated because some companies, quite frankly, may not have an established close process and procedures in place. So that's definitely a challenge, in and of itself. If a close procedure isn't, or if the company planning on doing the conversion is still working on their inventory close steps, it could extend the scope of the conversion. But conversely, it might also be an opportunity to revisit costing and seeing if maybe buttoning up the revaluation and closing steps would alleviate any costing issues. So a lot of times, you're having these conversations, hey, we want to move to standard costing, but it might take a deeper dive into understanding how it's being costed today. Maybe there are steps we can take to alleviate that whole conversation to go to standard costing, because it might not be as complicated as users think once they get the experience, the repetitions, and system knowledge to make those decisions. So regardless of whether we're going to standard costing or making a change to a FIFO or LIFO or average method, the close step should happen regardless. So that's why I wanted to highlight here. But before we kind of go down the path of converting to standard costing, there are a couple of configurations within D365 we have to capture. So like I mentioned, there's a few steps that need to be addressed before executing the conversion. One of them involves the creation of an item model group that has a standard cost as its costing method. When setting up the new item model group, it is imperative that the inventory policies regarding physical and financial negative inventory are consistent with the item model group you are converting from. So if I have, the flag to allow physical negative inventory, I need to make sure that that's true with my standard costing too, because of the whole timing of inventory transactions and how they get revalued when you're negative and what it pulls. Those two flags need to be in alignment. So that's one configuration we absolutely have to set up. The second configuration needed is to assign a cost group to each item. So the cost group that is assigned to a purchase item will act as a basis for assigning ledger accounts that are related to standard costs. If the cost group is assigned to a manufactured item, the cost group can act as a basis for assigning general ledger accounts related to standard costs, such as assigning GL accounts for production variances. So depending on the cost group and if the items contain in a BOM, what level, there's just different postings that can come into play. So that's our second piece of configuration. So since converting to standard cost requires new postings to take place, an activity to create new GL accounts will need to happen. Again, some of that pre-work before we get into the system steps, accounting needs to go in and actually create those GL accounts for standard cost variances. Maybe they want to be tracked in different GL accounts, so you could reconcile different subledgers. All that kind of that pre-work that sweat equity, so to speak, before we go through and actually do the conversion. So once those accounts are created, they can be assigned in the posting screen listed in the inventory management module, which I've highlighted here. And then optionally, in a manufacturing environment, you may be inclined to set up a standard order quantity to an item when there are constant costs. This will help both in planning and estimating and costing. And then finally, another optional setup is to configure the number sequence for revaluation and the vouchers that are posted at the time of conversion. Just like any other number sequence, you could configure that pretty easily. So then the next step in the process centers around the transition steps. So now that we touched on the inventory close and the prerequisites for conversion, we can now touch on the transition steps. So the transition period is identified in the standard cost conversions form to create a new conversion record with the new costing conversion that is created from the conversion form itself. In the lower portion of the cost conversion screen, which I really didn't give a good screenshot here, but we'll see it in my demo, users will identify the items that will be converted. So there's a price button that will open up the familiar costing version screen, which in the bottom left corner of the slide, you can see it looks familiar to the costing version sheet. We have our pending and active prices tab. And this is where our pending cost entries are made for the item or items at their respective sites. So in the bottom left, you'll see the price type is cost, got my item number, the item name. Yes, I did a meal kit delivery service, and I included some ribeyes in there. Decent price, $14.99, I thought, but you could see all the sites are listed there. And then once we enter in all of these items and pending costs, there's a check button at the header level of this form, which I actually captured in the screenshot in the bottom right under number 2. And then when you click that, it will run a check to verify that to make sure all issues have been resolved that may prevent conversion. If issues arise, such as, maybe a site doesn't have a pending cost, the issue will display in the check report and users will have to resolve the issues before proceeding to the ready status. So after items pass the quote unquote inspection, then the status of the record is set to ready. On the planned conversion date, the conversion happens and users can run a new close. So this screen here that I've kind of just presented a snippet, we'll demo it later. But I also wanted to say, if we look at the bottom left, our costing type is in the top left of that screenshot is a conversion, which isn't normally selected when we do a manual costing version update. So that's unique when we do the standard costing conversion. But I also wanted to make note that as part of your conversion, in the data management section, you can still use the traditional upload for uploading pending prices. So you can still use that data entity. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but it might be a pending prices version 2. There's a version 2 in there somewhere. You could still upload it and upload all those pending item prices, so you don't have to worry about having to go through and manually do all of them, which is nice. So now we're going to talk about conversion and close. So after the conversion process is successfully completed, the inventory model for each item is based on standard cost and the item standard cost is enabled. Subsequent inventory transactions will be valued at the item's standard cost. And in addition, the system converts the item's physical inventory transactions for receipts and issues to standard cost based on the conversion date. The system also converts the item's financial on-hand inventory to standard cost, and it posts the difference in value as an inventory revaluation, which we talked about when we talked about the number sequence setup. So any transactions that occur after the conversion are valued at the item's standard cost going forward. At this point in time, you cannot enter backdated transactions before the conversion date because an inventory close must be performed 1 day before the conversion date, which we'll also see once we get to the demo. So I also wanted to include a slide that captures common issues tied to converting from actual, or maybe not actual, but LIFO, FIFO, average cost to standard costs. There are going to be some transactional issues that may prevent a conversion from taking place, but this is a similar exercise to the month-end close process, right? You may encounter some production orders that are in process and not financially ended. These orders will need to be ended or will need to be financially ended or brought back to a scheduled, estimated, or created status where you don't have any inventory transactions executing. They exist, but they're not executed against, right? Nothing's, picked and whipped or anything like that. Also, an item's transaction cannot exist on or after the planned conversion date for the conversion record. So, this may require the changing of the planned conversion date until after the date of existing transactions. So again, that's kind of why I suggested if we're going to go down this path to communicate a plan, maybe do it over a weekend, depending on how your business runs. Additionally, if an item has transactions in other modules that have not been posted, you will be asked to post them, right? Purchase, sales, maybe there's open inventory transaction journals, things of that nature. And then as I mentioned in the high level flow of conversion in previous slides, a month-end close needs to be executed 1 day before the planned conversion date. Earlier in the configuration section of this presentation, I had mentioned that the item model group needs to be configured and that the negative inventory policy needs to be consistent between the two costing models. So again, talked about this earlier, but just want to reiterate that that setting needs to be consistent. And then there are a couple checks that need to be done on the pending standard costs as well. So for the item to be ready for conversion, a pending standard cost must be entered for each site, just like your cost roll would be if you're already on standard costing. If an item is a product master with multiple inventory dimension combinations, whether it's one or all four, a cost record must be entered for each one. And then if an item's pending standard cost has a from date that differs from the conversion date, the from date on the pending price has to be updated. So on that pending standard cost, there's a few issues that can kind of bubble up within that form. And then in terms of other gotchas, there are a few other item-related issues that can prevent a successful conversion too. First of all, service item cannot have a standard cost model, so make sure that no service items are listed in conversion. And then when entering posting combinations, verify that there's a GL account populated for the revaluation account. And as a final heads up, if the item is already at standard cost, I know this may sound trivial, but make sure it's not going to get converted. Like I said, these things come up. I mean, they seem simple, but just know that they do come up. So now let's talk about a non-standard costing change. So when making a costing move, such as transitioning from a FIFO to a LIFO method, Please be advised that a change of that nature would involve the accounting department, and a change would need to be filed with the IRS. Now, I'm not an accountant by trade, but know that it is a necessary step in all these changes. Unfortunately, there's not as straightforward of a system process, so the plan to convert requires some offline orchestration, just like what we talked about previously with the standard cost conversion. Just like with any inventory close, make sure that all item transactions are financially updated. There are some exceptions to this rule when changing the item model group and running an inventory recalculation. For the sake of this presentation, and because this is such a big decision to make, we are going to assume that all items will be changed. So once the close has been executed, change the item model group on the item to reflect the correct costing method, and then revalue your inventory immediately. Now again, there's one exception to this type of change due to a D365 limitation. Companies cannot move from a moving average method to a FIFO, LIFO, or average method. Unfortunately, I have not had experience with any of my clients talking about this type of transition, but through some of my research, I've seen that this type of conversion is not feasible. And actually, if you try to make that change within the environment, it won't happen. The system won't allow you to do it. All right, so let's talk about why I put a big no on a previous slide regarding the conversion from a standard cost. Well, there's a big reason why. There's no recommended and supported solution from Microsoft regarding this type of change. So why is that? Standard costing does not require inventory close, so there aren't any settlements on inventory transactions, which would then impact us if we were updating or if we had different costs on items. Just think about the settlement results that display when running a revaluation or close. You have the different postings. You could see on your inventory transactions what settled. So if the system cannot capture the revalued settlement due to the older standard costing items, we start to run into issues. So since we have this system limitation, it is highly recommended to start fresh with new items if thinking about going from standard to another costing method. Unfortunately, that might not be feasible for a lot of companies, and quite frankly, it isn't. Right? A lot of your items have manufacturer's items, vendor items, customer items. They're smart numbered, so that's a huge limitation. And when companies do talk about changing costing methods, usually it's around the time they're looking maybe to go from 2012 to D365, or maybe do, I don't want to say a reimplementation because that's not feasible, but then that will lead to conversations about, like I mentioned previously, doing additional research on costing and how can we fine tune the system using existing tools instead of scratching everything and starting from square one. So, there's opportunities everywhere for improvement. So I also wanted to include a slide in this presentation dedicated to, higher level costing tips. Prior to making the decision to change a costing method, it may make sense to do a cost study within your Dynamics instance. So with that, I want to first start with reviewing the costing sheet. We would first want to verify that a cost of purchase and a cost of conversion cost tree are established within your costing sheet. From there, we would then check to see if cost groups are correctly identified and set up. Then from there, we would do some scenario testing where we would see if we have depreciation calculating correctly, or maybe it would be fruitful to see if surcharges are missing when calculating the cost of purchase. So it's just kind of an evolving step, or you're peeling back layers of the onion to see, okay, how are my costs coming through when I review the costing sheet? Am I missing something? Do I need to add something? Is it calculating incorrectly? I've encountered each of these issues when reviewing clients' cost sheets. Why isn't I want 3% freight set up on my purchase items when they come in? That can be configured in the costing sheet. So let's talk about it. Let's look at that costing sheet. Can we find anything that we could improve on? So that costing sheet can really uncover a lot of issues and help us with getting our costs correctly. And then going in terms of some item setups, are the cost groups correctly set up on them? I could go in and discuss looking at the postings of the item. I'm talking about the actual GL postings of the item, but then we would be down a wormhole related to tying inventory costs to the inventory value report, reconciling your ledger and subledger. I mean, that is a full session in and onto of itself. So if you are curious, I have done that type of analysis as well. But staying on this topic, we would also want to verify that we have an active updated cost roll, and that it has pulled in every cost level. So I guess, we need to look at a lot of things just at a high level, from a high level perspective, to see if they're set up. Do we need to add anything? Do we need to remove anything? And again, this is taking out that whole GL piece that, like I said, I could spend hours on talking about reconciling that inventory value report and any discrepancies or the possible errors that can come up with that. That would be a different session, maybe even a different maybe a topic for next year's summit, reconciling that. But that's something that I've done, historically in the past as well. That a lot of clients will come to me and ask me for help with that. So with that being said, I think I'm done with my PowerPoint presentation. I do want to present the demo portion of this presentation where we will do a quick and dirty non-standard cost conversion, along with a more in-depth look at the conversion to standard cost approach. So thank you for listening to this recording of the PowerPoint. And from here, we're going to dive into the demo. So thank you. Hello again, everyone, and thank you for sitting through the first part of my presentation regarding the cost conversions. I did want to briefly demo some of the D365 conversion functionality that I talked about during the presentation, so bear with me as I briskly walk through some of it. So yeah, as you can see from my screen, I am filtered on just some basic demo items. So I'm going to click into my standard speaker DF11 here. As you can see, we have the item model group set up as average. I'm going to click into this just to prove that it is indeed a weighted average. So I have it selected, and I'm going to change this to a FIFO item model group. So I'm going to choose it. I'm going to select it. I'm going to save it, and basically that's about it. Again, the system process for this type of change is relatively simple, but that doesn't account for all the pre-work that went into it to actually determine to make a change going to a different costing method. Also, I wanted to call out that you do need, or suggested to, run an inventory close, and then once the change is made, run a close again, run a recalc, just so you're starting from ground zero. So that's the easier conversion. Now the next thing I want to do is actually change to standard costing, which does involve a little bit more setup. So let's look at our item 12 here. So here we could see the item model group is FIFO. As I mentioned previously, we do have a couple configuration settings that we want to do. So we have a standard model item model group set up. And then I also have a cost group here that we want to add to the item as part of the configuration. So those are two of the things we need to make sure we have set up. I also want to check my postings. So I'm going to go to my posting screen here in inventory management. And I need to verify that for my standard cost variances, I do have GL accounts set up. And fortunately, this is demo data. I have, for all items, my variance accounts here. So those two pieces of the configuration are set up, which is great. And as I mentioned earlier, I did run a close on the item. So that's been completed. And then finally, I'm going to navigate to the screen where we do the standard cost conversion. So it's under product information management. Under periodic tasks, we have cost conversions, standard cost conversions. I did a little pre-work before this demo. So I set up a new record called Dave's Summit Conversion. I've got a transition date and a conversion date. And then what I actually had to do was set up a conversion record here. And this generates a costing version in the costing version screen. But I do want you to take note that the costing type is a conversion costing type, which is not something you can manually select when you're creating a costing version. This type of costing is only created when you do the conversion to a standard cost. So I did want to call that out. Right now our status is planned and we have a default model group here of standard. Like I mentioned, we did have one configured, and this dropdown is only going to show us our item model groups that are set up for standard costing. Then down here in the second portion of the screen, we have the item that we actually want to convert today. So for this demo, I have standard speaker DF12. If I wanted a full list of items, there's data entities that we could use to import that information here. We could load it here, and then subsequently we can upload a cost for those items that you have as a costing version, the one that we just created up here, which is nice when we're doing, you know, a conversion over a weekend. So here's our item number converted to our new model group. And then once you have all your items here, one thing before we do that, I do want to show you our costing version. So here's all of our prices. That I set up at our different sites for $99.99. So it's just like our costing version sheet with our pending and active prices. I'm going to close out of here. And then I'm going to run a check to make sure that our items are ready for conversion. So I've got these flags to indicate, okay, you know, check the item, check the model group, update the status when it's run. So the report's going to run. We're going to see if we run into any issues, which I'm anticipating we will. Yep. And here you can see we get some verbiage. The item price does not exist for site 6, which is what I anticipated. So to update that, just go to your costing versions. Let's go back to the price. And then we're simply going to set up a new cost record for this item. Speaker DF12. Let's do site 6. Let's do $99.99. We're going to save this. That's updated. I'm going to run a check again just to verify that everything's okay. And that line item should fall off, and it did. I'm going to refresh my screen. Notice that my status on the lower portion of the screen changed to checked. My status up at the header is still planned. That's going to change when I click my update status to ready, which means, hey, we are ready to convert. So my status switched to ready. And then I'm going to click convert. I'm going to stop on error, and I'm going to activate my costing version. I'm going to hit OK. Yes, I'm the only user in the system. So notice that no inventory close could be detected on the day prior to conversion. The job will automatically perform one. I'm going to hit yes. It's probably going to take some time. Operations completed. I'm just going to do a refresh. My status is completed and my status is converted. And that's basically it. So I hope that was, well, that was brisk. I hope that was simple enough. I do like the tool that they have here to go to standard cost. It's nice. And again, if you have questions, reach out to me either directly, or we could set something up with the user group. I could walk through this again, or we can set up some time to talk. Thank you very much for attending both my presentation and demo today, and look forward to speaking with you. Thank you.
Thank you, David. That was awesome. If anyone has questions, please type those into the Q&A panel. We do have a few minutes left to take some questions, should you have any. Friendly reminder to go ahead and fill out your session survey for us, and we do share those with the speakers, and to utilize your chat feature or your Q&A feature for David. David, thank you for taking time to share your knowledge with the community today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Jenna, and thank you for everyone for attending. Hope you learned something. Again, if you have questions, you know, I'm available to answer any of them, and enjoy your weekend.
Yes, everyone enjoy your weekend, and thanks so much. I'm not seeing any questions, David, so I will end our session. Have a wonderful afternoon, everyone. Thanks again, David.
Thank you.